Thank you, Mark. And thank you to Jordan for holding our container today with her tech expertise. And Mark, it really brought a smile to my face to hear about your brother, Yaakov, and holding his memory today, as well as the memory of my nephew, Rod Fiorini, of blessed memory. Today is his birthday. So I'm so grateful to be holding their souls and so many others in my heart as I lead this meditation today. So Mark highlighted for us this really liminal time that we're in, just having come out of Yom Kippur and getting ready to prepare for the Sukkot holiday, which begins on Friday night. So both holidays, Yom Kippur and the festival of Sukkot, embrace joy. This sometimes surprises us with Yom Kippur because we think of it as such a serious day, and it is. But it's also a joyful day, and yet Sukkot, Zaman Simchatenu, is the time of our rejoicing, a time in which we come out of the internal space of Yom Kippur, kind of the heart space, out into nature, out into a broader and joyful expression of our physical bodies. We're outside, we're aware of the elements, we're encouraged to eat and drink and to live life to its fullest because we're aware of the precarious nature of our Sukkot, these humble huts that we build outside that are vulnerable and susceptible to the elements and so many other things. So we have kind of joyful seriousness in Yom Kippur, and then we have the festival of Sukkot emphasizing our physical senses and experiencing joy through our bodies. So one of the questions I'm really thinking about during these days is, how do I hold the wisdom that I was exposed to or I could tap into from the festival or the holiday of Yom Kippur and carry it into this embodied place of Sukkot? Because there is joy, but they're different. Different things that are emphasized in each one of the holidays. So I want to ask Jordan to share screen for a moment, and I'm going to share with you some texts from both of the holidays and also one in the middle that will help to frame our meditation today. So on Yom Kippur, when we have the Yizkor memorial service and we hold the memory of people in our hearts and we give voice to that through our own personal prayers, the Yizkor memorial service opens with a very poignant line from Psalm 90. And so you'll see that there: teach us to count each day that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. So this is how we enter into Yizkor, the Yizkor service on Yom Kippur. We also have Yizkor services on other days in our liturgical calendar. We, in being aware of those people we've lost, we also become aware of our own mortality. And we're asked to really consider how we think of and count each day as a path towards wisdom in our lives. And there are different ways to do this counting or dividing or planning, however you want to think of it. So I want to offer one that I came across recently in my study of the Babylonian Talmud during Daf Yomi, the cycle of studying a page of Talmud every day. Rav Safra said, in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, let a person divide the years of their life into thirds. And of course, this is a very rabbinic answer, right? A third for studying Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, a third for studying Mishnah, the first compilation of early rabbinic literature, and a third for Talmud, which is a rabbinic expansion of the Mishnah texts. So after Rav Safra says this, some other anonymous voice pops up in the house of study in our Talmud and says, well, that's easy for you to say. How do you know how to divide something into thirds if you don't know how long you're going to live? And so another voice in the Beit Midrash pipes up and says, when you think about Rav Safra's teaching, it can only be applied to days, right? Like we can only think of this, and there's kind of two answers in here that I didn't put in terms of explanations. You can either think, okay, I'm going to divide my day into thirds and spend my day really addressing the priorities that are important to me for living a meaningful life. The rabbis have their own take on that, of course, through study. Or you can say, I'm going to take a week, right? I have faith I'm going to live for another week. And I'm going to make sure that during the course of this week, as I count my days, that I'm hitting those things that are most important in life. I'm going to divide them into the top three. And I'm going to try to really allot time mindfully for engaging in those things that matter the most for having a meaningful life. For some of us, this might remind us of a text I did not include on the sheet from Pirkei Avot, which is part of that early collection of rabbinic wisdom, where a rabbi says, do teshuvah, turn back in your life, repent one day before you die. But of course, we don't know when we're going to die. So what's the answer? Well, we have to do that process every day. And coming to our sit is one way of doing that together as a community, right? That turning back, that reflection, not just on Yom Kippur, but all the time. So that's right. That's straight up from Yom Kippur, our memorial service, very introspective, kind of serious reckoning of what our lives look like. And then we're headed into Sukkot, in which we read from the book of Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes. This will be read in the synagogue, in most synagogues, a week from this Saturday, toward the end of the holiday. And Ecclesiastes has this kind of like, you don't know how long you're going to live. So just embrace the physicality, enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry, really. So I brought one such verse from the book to kind of underscore like what this other idea is in Sukkot. There's nothing worthwhile for a person but to eat and drink and afford themselves enjoyment with all their means, right? Like kind of maybe throw caution to the wind a little bit. We don't know how long we're going to live. And so on one hand, we're in this liminal time between a very thoughtful, like, how should I count and plan my days? And this other idea of how do I just embrace the moment and my physicality, because we don't know how long we have. So I want to hold that tension as we come into the sit and lift up this quote by E.B. White. And I want to thank Rabbi Edwin Goldberg for bringing this quote to my attention. If the world were merely seductive, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world. And this makes it hard to plan the day. So indeed, it's hard to plan the day, right? How do we identify the things that are of top priority in our lives and allot this time that we don't know how long we have to do our best to make those values front and center in our lives? For the rabbis, it was dividing our time into studying 3 strains of Jewish text. This really calls us to hold, as we go into Sukkot, a time of letting off the restraints and just feeling footloose and fancy-free, to not lose sight of the importance of practice. We're here today. We all made the time to sit and be present during or part of or the entirety of this half hour together as a virtual Jewish community. That is a choice, right? That is an allotment of the time. That is counting the days. And yes, it's hard to plan the day, but we did this part of the day and we're here. So I want to invite you into the sit. At the end of the sit, we're going to come together and I'll share a melody that many people will know based on the words of Kohelet, of Ecclesiastes. And so we'll do that at the end. When you hear my voice, we'll come back together before we turn to the mourner's Kaddish. But I want to offer you a potential anchor for today's sit as you find your place. And that is the word keva. Keva means, some people will translate it as something that is fixed. Today, I'd like to think of keva as an anchor. What is an anchor in your life? What is something that you continually come back to, whether it is this sit, whether it is study, whether it is family, and you make a commitment to that. Even though you know it's hard to plan the day, you make an attempt to plan the day, to plan the week, and to come back to that anchor. Maybe the keva for you today is your breath, if that's accessible to you, and maybe you want to consider chanting this 2-syllable Hebrew word to yourself. Keva, keva, my keva. Maybe give voice to what your keva is. So I offer those opportunities to you if you want to stick with the breath, if you want to use this word keva as a mantra or a chant, to think about what's your anchor, to feel in your bodies what that anchor is. So we'll have about 10 minutes or so of quiet, and then we'll come back together with some singing. We'll screen share the words before the mourner's Kaddish. As we transition from our sit into our close today, I share the words of a song that many of us know, based on a verse, a very famous verse from the book of Kohelet. So I invite you to sing a bit of this with me as we come back. I love that Pete Seeger's version mentions turning, because turning, doing teshuvah is what we have been doing and will continue to do through this season and hopefully every day of our lives. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to love, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven.
Thank you so much, Susan, as always, for a beautiful practice and for planning it so beautifully for us today. And friends, we seal the practice as we do each day, offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning, observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join the Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, to extend your practice by being present for those who are and offering your compassionate support. You can put the name or names of those loved ones you're honoring today in the chat box, either now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you're reciting it, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabba, Yamad, Yamlift, Pachutei, Kayechol, Kaye Beit Israel, Agala, Man Karim, Rabba, Barak, Lame Havaya, Yibarach Yishmar V'Yamam Shlama Rabba Im Aleinu V'Yal Israel Shalom Inu V'Yal Israel Amen. Beautiful. Amen. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We thank Mark Shemaria for sponsoring our practice today in loving memory of your brother, Rabbi Jerry Yaakov Shemaria, Zichrono Livracha, blessed memory. We're grateful to you, Mark, for sponsoring our practice today. And we're grateful as well, of course, to Jordan Pollock for holding our space and to our teacher for today, Rabbi Susan Leider, for leading us in practice again so beautifully. Friends, if you're leaving us now, hope you'll join us tomorrow. I'll lead the session tomorrow. It's co-sponsored by the Jewish Addiction Awareness Network. Again, it'll be like our customary sit, but of special interest for people who are in recovery or have family who are in recovery, or if you just have an interest, and if you know of anybody who you think would be interested or might benefit, please invite them and encourage us to join us. Also, just one last note before we end, which is that our daily sit is now a podcast, and I'm very excited about that. Very excited about the response to that. Putting a link in the chat. We're releasing one of the sits from each week. In general, that will be how the podcast will operate, as a podcast that you can just listen to or revisit. Now there are 4 episodes that are there, and tomorrow a new episode will be released. So please do subscribe. If you are someone who listens to or subscribes to podcasts, you can find it on any of the podcasting platforms. And with that, happy to, if you're leaving us now, we hope you have a good, safe rest of your day. And if you're staying on, you're welcome to just continue to sit together with us, or join us for conversation or questions. If you have a question for Rabbi Susan Leider, please put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. And or just share a reflection on your experience with the practice today, sitting in our virtuous sukkah. Lori has a question. Well, I was going to ask you the question. I thought actually, one of the things that I think that is really valuable about our daily sit, Susan, is making the connection between Jewish spiritual vocabulary and contemporary mindfulness and meditation. So keva and kavanah are 2 terms that are used in Jewish tradition to describe, keva means fixed, or it's even the verb that's used for affixing a mezuzah on the doorpost. It's about having something that is fixed in place, so it's kind of structure. And then kavanah is the intention. And all of Jewish spiritual practice is really this combination of those 2, of keva and kavanah. So I really appreciated the idea of choosing our anchor, whatever it might be, as our keva, and then having that I want to invite you to say, and then the kavanah is, and I was going to invite you, if you would, to fill in the blank on that, about how if in our practice, mindfulness practice, not just while we're meditating, but as we go about our day, trying to be awake and aware, if keva is being connected to and aware of something that's a fixed point that we orient ourselves to, breath, body, sensation, sound, etc., then how can we understand kavanah as a mindfulness practice? And then I see Lori has a question that that's a follow-up.
Yeah. So I'll answer from my own practice today. I felt like for me today, the kavanah emerged from the keva, and I can explain that, or the anchor of the practice gave birth to an intent and an awareness. So I'll just share what happened with me. It's not always common that I do. It began swaying, like my pelvis kind of was swaying today, which was not usual. But I began to get this image of my pelvis being the anchor, right, like deep in the sea, but that the rest of my body up on the ocean, up on the water, was like could move, right? So like buffeted by this, buffeted by that. And it was for me, a very powerful image. And then what began to emerge was, I guess, the kavanah, which is, what are the anchors in my life? Like, what are the values, the way I want to spend my time, that I want to recommit to? And I felt like those were the things, almost like the waves pulling me towards things, but there was a fluidity, right? An anchor in my pelvis, but I could move towards things as I needed to. And things came up in my life that I wanted to recommit to, specific things, not just, oh, this is my anchor, but like specific things or people or causes or ways of spending my time, I thought, you know what? I need to recommit to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would have had that experience of recommitting, the kavanah of that,
Mm-hmm.
had I not entered into this space today and sought the anchor of in my case, my pelvis and the breath. So I don't know, that's where I'm coming through today.
That sounds great. I mean, I think what I like about that is, in terms of this practice, is that the kavanah there, tell me if I got this right, is really this kind of aspiration or this intention just to come back, right? To practice teshuva, to come back to that awareness over and over again. So Lori was asking, I'm not sure if maybe we can unpack Lori's question here a little bit. How do we embody God or higher power as our keva? I don't know what you make of that, Lori.
That's
maybe
a
you can
huge
spell that out a little bit.
Great question, Lori. I saw that, and I feel like where I first went with that question was to body, right?
Mm-hmm.
That when I become aware of what's happening with my body, for me, that's a portal to the divine, right? Because this is what I have to embody a higher power in the world. I have this body. And so for me, one of the first ways to do that is through awareness of what is happening in my body, which of course we can open up to by making this time to sit, is to discover what is going on with my body. And to me, that leads to how I act in the world. It led me today to recommit to several people or purposes or causes that, like, oh no, I need to commit to that. That's an anchor. So, but again, I wouldn't have come to that. I wouldn't have known how to embody that if I didn't connect with just the sensation first.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a similar answer to the first question, but a very powerful and broad question, Lori.
I have like an answer to that that's not as embodied. It's interesting. I know I'm thinking about this, that if the keva is something fixed, I just put in the chat just because Deborah asked what does keva mean? And I don't know if Susan, if you have another word or, if you would add to that English translation of keva, thinking like, what is something that is fixed, something that's immovable. But then I thought, well, it's something that is unchanging, right? Something that is steady and unchanging. And given that everything is changing always, what is unchanging? And I thought about the question about, I wouldn't have thought about this, but the idea of God as keva made me think about, like, what's the aspect of myself that is not changing? My body is changing, my emotions are changing, my mind is changing. My soul is not changing. My soul, which is like that profound connection to God, God is unchanging in that sense. So I don't think I would have seen that. I don't know, or thought about that. I'm not sure what to make of that, but in a sense, it's sort of a nice, for me, then it becomes a nice intention to have as an anchor to look for that which is unchanging in myself and in other people, which is to say, to remember the soul, to see, when we look at each other, we look at each other on this Zoom screen, we see faces and images and the question really is, like, can we see and acknowledge each other's neshama, right? God or godliness, right? People want to put it in a different way, or divinity or holiness. That's unchanging. That's fixed. It's interesting because it's like the most ephemeral and least physical of all those dimensions, right? It's the most purely spiritual dimension that's fixed. I don't know. That just came to me.
Well, I think you're pointing to, Mark, that fixed, and in answer to Pancha's questions, the terms are not Kabbalistic, as I understand it, keva and kavanah, the fixed nature of something, and then the heart or the kavanah or the fresh approach that we bring to something. These are rabbinic terms, and they express the tension that we have in our tradition of having a fixed liturgy, and yet being commanded to approach that, or asked, really, command is probably not the best word, but like being invited to encounter that afresh each day. And so, Mark, so I feel that there's a little bit of a danger in using the word fixed, because then we think we're stuck.
Right.
And so I love what you're saying is the thing.
And
that
also,
is,
we don't engage in fixing and fixing. So it's a problem
there
for
we
us at
go.
RJS.
Another,
So we need another word.
Yeah. And so I don't know why, for me, I don't know. I guess anchor keeps coming back. And an image that came up for me when you were sharing your imagery, Mark, is that an anchor is fixed, but you can pull the anchor up and you can move it. And in fact, I would even say that sometimes an anchor does move a little bit if the vessel to which it's attached is strong and right. It can shift. It can.
And maybe it may need to.
It might need to, because the elements, right? And also at some point you might say, what has been serving me or serving the divine, which has been fixed in my life? It's now time to go back to the mezuzah language, to reaffix it, right? To say, I need to pull the anchor up. I need to drop the anchor somewhere else now, right? And this is now, so that's a way of, like, an anchor is unchanging, but it's not immovable.
Yeah, it's worth, and this is a really important and good discussion, just to lift up that this is an ongoing aspect of spiritual dynamics, probably not just within Judaism, but definitely within Judaism. And there are many different ways of expressing it. One of the tensions or creative tensions is between halakha, Jewish law, right, which is, quote, fixed at any given moment, and agadah, which is the narrative, the part that adds the fluidity and movement to it, so that it doesn't become rigid and can be alive, just like in our body. Our skeleton, our skeletons are kind of the hard, fixed part, right? And then we've got the soft tissues and the body that moves around it. But we need a structure. Or what we just went through with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? Like, start with the day of Din, of judgment, and move towards day of Rachamim, of compassion. So all of this is making me, I'm just looking to see if there is another question I want to, okay, Harris writes, can an anchor keep us rooted but still flexible in movement with boundaries?
So I'm going to go back to kind of a concrete example.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, so some of us rebel against that structure. Like, we feel like, I'm only going to study, or I'm only going to meditate if I feel moved to do that. And we fight creating those containers. So I want to ask you a question. If you've ever had a fixed appointment on your calendar, a recurring appointment that you set for yourself, and you've moved it, right? Because you want to be flexible. And you've moved it from Tuesday to Wednesday because Tuesday got too busy, right? And then Wednesday comes, and then you find yourself, should I be flexible and move it again? Or should I? And then you look up and you say, okay, now it's been 2 or 3 days or a week since I engaged in that sacred activity that I named as a top priority. That is the tension, right? Because we want to be flexible in, yes, bumping that to the next day. And we also know that if we continue to do that, we've lost our sense of kava. And how do we have rachamim? How do we have compassion for the days when, I can't pull that off today? It's going to have to be postponed. And also knowing that if I live my life postponing those things, and I don't know how long I'm going to live, then that doesn't get us to where we'd like to be either. So
more good questions here, but we're pretty much at time, so we'll leave it there. But they're excellent questions, really good discussion in the chat as usual. And Susan, I want to thank you again, as always, and for your beautiful voice, and for ending with that. I always love that Pete Seeger version of Kohelet. We didn't get to, when a little frustrated, we didn't get to explore so much that segue from Yom Kippur to Sukkot. But thank you so much for lifting that up and bringing that in, and just locating us where we are in the calendar right now. So wishing you and yours a Chag Sameach, and our gratitude as always for leading us so beautifully today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. Chag Sameach.
And thanks to Mark for sponsoring us, and for Jordan for holding our space, and to each of you for being here. Hope to see you tomorrow. If we don't see you tomorrow,